Hi, I'm Doc John.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chloe Costigan.
And we're from Mobility Doc. We want to talk to you today about
something near and dear to our hearts. So this is one of my most favorite things that we've developed over the years, which is like what we call a primer, or it's a triplet of 3 exercises that is intended to get your body ready to move well. It's actually at the basis of all of our rehab. So like the idea is that we address 3 different parts. So we need to improve flexibility, stability, and strength. And all of those exercises are related to a specific movement pattern.
We do work with people who are trying to continue to do things that are very difficult throughout their entire life. And we're the ones who have to figure out, even though everyone's telling you to stop, how do you continue? You really kind of championed this idea. And where exactly did it come from again for you?
So it was actually with my work with Carrie Morgan, who is a fabulous yoga teacher. When we were working together, we were trying to help people to be able to understand parts of a yoga pose better. So we had said, okay, well, we know that we need some amount of flexibility. We need to help them to understand that they need to activate certain muscles and then also move in a specific way, which is some of that strength work. So it had just kind of evolved over the years, like probably 4 or 5 years ago now.
I feel like it took life as we used it with more types of people and patients and starting to really address to get someone activated before they do something. So that way they have full use of their mobility and essentially like using a primer to reduce friction, correct?
Yes. So some of this is taken from NASM.
What's NASM? For those of us who don't know.
National Academy of Sports Medicine.
That is correct. Yeah.
That was a test too.
Yeah.
Like, you had talked to me about that like a decade ago.
Yeah, the principles were out there already. Like, it's not that the individual ideas were novel, but the hardest thing always, I think, is like to take something that's so fundamental and make it easy and part of everything. It always looks so obvious, but when we started to like layer flexibility, stability, and strength, instead of just saying like, hey, I don't know, Tim, why don't you just work on your flexibility, or why don't you just work on your strength and, do 3 sets of 10 of this, and then 3 sets of 10 of that, so on and so forth. We started to really play around with doing a circuit of 3 movements that address flexibility, stability, and strength for a specific movement or activity. What we found is if someone stops treating their warm-ups as just purely like stretching or strength work, skips and hops and jumps, like if you start layering in specific to your needs, mobility, stability, and strength, we had a better outcome in making sure then in this case, my right hip doesn't just like start to fall apart because from the very beginning, it had less work capacity than the left side, so its ability to do work and not fatigue wasn't as good. So my right side was, let's pretend, 80% capable. My left side was 100% capable, but it felt equal because I hadn't reached a stimulus that was enough to really challenge my hips. So the primer helps you to recalibrate, make sure your right and your left are equal.
Yeah, I'll describe it sometimes as like a gas tank in a sense. So that's your work capacity. So sometimes like one side has like a little bit of a smaller gas tank than the other side. That primer then is designed to equalize those. So then to say like, okay, we need this size gas tank on your right side as you do on your left side in order to be able to do certain activities.
Yeah, and the push really on our part, whether you're one of our wonderful recreational athletes or a grandparent or like a world-class athlete on a USA team, is we're trying to remove inefficiencies. We're trying to make sure that you're as strong as possible in that moment.
And I think that this also highlights another really important part of the primer is that you need to think of your body as a dynamic system, right? It's not a statue. It doesn't just like stay kind of in this like one form all the time. We kind of have to be like constantly doing something to make sure that it's like staying in the form that we want it to be in. So that's what a primer does, is it kind of says, oh, okay, well, after, this long run or after this activity or walking around at an amusement park all day, simple things, you're kind of moving away from that most efficient way that you can move. So that primer kind of pushes you you back. It kind of says like, oh no, okay, like you need to be here because this is where you can move best. It's totally normal though throughout your daily life that you're going to be pushed away from that, but then something like a primer is something fast to do and really effective to kind of then push you back to the center to make sure, okay, is everything functioning the way that it's supposed to?
Yeah, and because how long would you say like a primer needs to be?
It will be under 10 minutes. Especially if you know what you should be doing, then it'll be under 10 minutes.
Just to put that out there, we're saying you should replace this idea of warm up with primer. For those of you who are like a track and field athlete or any skill specific kind of athlete, I'm not saying that the primer replaces your skill specific warm up, but I'm saying, like Chloe was saying, any of the randomness that you do because you just have this like sack of crap that you've acquired over time of stretches and things. Yeah, I have strong feelings about this. Yeah. I remember when I was at Worlds in Eugene, Oregon, and I spoke to you about this.
Yeah.
I watched some of the best track and field athletes in our country just attach elastic bands to random things and just violently flail like they were seizing as part of a warm-up. It's questionable at best that there was any carryover. So like once they got out on the field, they knew exactly what they were doing for their warm-up. Like what they needed to do to break down their spin or their glide. I worked with Rudy Winkler, and Rudy's entire purpose was like, hey, I am getting a little older, and I need to achieve more in less time, and I need to achieve more by doing less. And so the primer is an answer to that.
I really like that. Achieve more by doing less.
Yeah, I love that. If I could do everything that way.
Yeah, and as someone who doesn't gravitate toward that, I will tell you this primer is actually really effective. So like as someone like myself who I just like assume like, oh, I'm just going to do more stuff and it's just going to be like better for me. That's not actually the case. That's why I feel like I'm actually really able to help my patients that have the propensity because I am that way myself. So that is what the primer does though, is that like you can do less but get more.
And at the heart of everything that is in our channel and our programming with MD Online and with what we give to our patients on a daily basis, the primer fills that gap of like, you no longer need to be somewhere, but you need to continue to do something. The primer is that something, and it's meant to be sustainable and achievable.
I want to make one more point about the primer.
Just one more point?
Just one more point about the primer.
You're counting too.
Okay. Is because this concept is built off of our like many thousands of patient interactions. So one of the things that we hear most frequently is someone will say, oh, this thing feels tight or this thing feels weak, so therefore I need X. Now, the reason why we have all three types of exercises in the primer, so the flexibility, stability, strength, is because sometimes when you have some amount of like pain, for example, or dysfunction, something can end up seeming like it's tight or it can seem like it's weak, but it's actually just because you haven't really rounded out all three of those. So again, like sometimes if I do a muscle test for someone and it's weak, and if I just like have them do some stretches or I treat them, then it will test strong. It's not all of a sudden strong. It's just that it's in a better position to be able to function the way that it's supposed to. So that's why I would say that it's really important to make sure that you hit those three parts of the flexibility, stability, and strength, because it's going to make sure that your nervous system, your body is most equipped to move the best that it can.
Yeah, right. Instead of assuming like maybe it's just flexibility, maybe it's just stability or my core, maybe it's just strength. Do all three, right? Because you can very easily cover all three. And again, you're choosing it for a specific area, for a specific need.
Let's talk through a little bit of an example. So in that way, this doesn't seem so theoretical, and then we can kind of like apply it to
it's a good point.
Something practical.
All right, so I'm a runner and I have right hip pain after I run, 5 miles or something. So it's not immediate. It's like a breakdown after some distance.
Okay. Where is the hip pain?
Right side, outer hip.
Outer hip, okay, there we go. So if it's right outer hip pain, what we would start with is say something like a figure 4 stretch or a piriformis stretch, just to then make sure that those deep glute muscles are flexible enough to be able to allow for the proper contraction of all of those muscles in the back. So your glute max, those short, tiny muscles that are intended to stabilize, as well as your hamstring. So you'd start off with holding that stretch for 30 seconds or so.
On each side.
On each side, yes. And then you move on to the second exercise, which is a stability exercise.
Something we like to use, for example, would be body weight, single leg glute bridge. Do 10 reps on your right side, do 10 reps on your left side, really focusing on keeping your hips level, fully contracting your glutes so that way you fully extend from your hip and you're not extending through your lumbar spine or through anything else in your body. It's all coming from your right hip, all coming then from your left hip.
And that's a really good point about these exercises, is that they're intended to isolate an area. And then also most of the exercises are single side. So then that gives you an opportunity to be able to say, oh, okay, well, what's going on with my left side versus what's going on with my right side? Because then you can start to kind of see a little bit more of like where there might be an issue. It's totally normal to have asymmetries, but when those asymmetries, like the gap between that left and right side becomes too large, that's the thing that opens you up to some type of injury. Finally, you can do something like a single leg RDL, or like what I like to also teach would be something like a 2-leg to a single leg RDL, just then you can really focus on some of the mechanics. I won't get into those now, even though I'm so tempted to tell you
because
exactly how to do this, right?
It's another
That's a different
video. Yes.
So then you would do 10 on each side. Now, you just did 3 different exercises. So you did a stretch, something to improve flexibility. Then you did something to activate a muscle
for stability.
Bridges. And then finally with a 2-leg to single leg RDLs, you did something for strength. So you're going to repeat that for a total of 3 rounds. You're not going to just do all the stretching, then all of the stability, and then all of the strength. You're going to cycle through each one of those, because each time you go through a round, then that's giving you an opportunity to refine that movement a little bit more.
Yeah, you're kind of like priming your body by layering on the flexibility, stability, and strength that your body needs before you go to run or do whatever exercise. In my example, it was 3 exercises chosen for my hip and my issue with my hip. And then you can continue to iterate on that idea and say, I think maybe the single leg glute bridges were too easy and I didn't really feel like much benefit from them, and you could sub it out with something else. If you're an upper body athlete, it might be something more for your upper thoracic and like shoulder area, but like you can apply this basic idea to everything. Give some good examples of use cases for these primers.
A good use case for the primer would be something like a warm-up. So, so often we sit on a foam roller for a little bit, or we do these like quote-unquote dynamic stretches. Something like this will be helpful for telling your body exactly what it's supposed to be doing and gets it on the right track. I also like to use it as a recovery sort of exercise.
Like end of day, sort of like feel better before I go to sleep kind of recovery?
Yeah, exactly. Because especially actually after I've done like a lot of activity in a given day, and you know how I was saying that you kind of move away from like your most ideal. So what I think of is like that primer pulls me back to that center to kind of say, okay, let me make sure that everything is activating the way it's supposed to. Let me make sure that these muscles are loose enough. So I'll even do it after the day of my long run, or if I have like 2 back-to-back long runs.
For the sake of just like listing maybe a few use cases, anyone who this would be good for, so that way you can see yourself in this person with like history of low back pain. They could develop a primer for...
Sometimes he asks these leading questions and then I'm like, why doesn't he just say?
Yeah, I thought we were going there.
No, we're not going there. John's going there.
Yeah, like history of low back pain.
Okay, yes.
A primer could be used to address like the mobility, stability, and strength that is just always going to be true for you because you have this history and you'll always need to do something to stay ahead of it, correct?
Yeah, so you're saying it is like maintenance.
Yeah. Primer as maintenance for someone with a history of some pain.
Okay. Primer as recovery, primer as a warm-up.
Right. We're not saying you can just avoid all healthcare, but primers are the solution for the person who's not necessarily acutely injured or immediately post-surgical. There are a number of primer videos that we already have up for your body for all different use cases that we keep updating. So if you're curious about primers and what they might look like, definitely look at the different triplets that we put together.
And also just to say, you don't necessarily need a diagnosis for this, so you don't even really need an injury. But if you're aware of the fact that, say, something feels tighter or there's like something that's a little off one side to another, then a primer is a really good thing to use.
Like I said, there is plenty of free content on our YouTube that addresses this. We'll keep making more videos that are talking more and more about friction and what that is, primers and what they are, this idea of like flexibility versus mobility and like what the words mean. For those of you who want like a little bit more in-depth help, you could definitely check out mobility-doc.com, because we have our MD online services, which are everything from just $20 monthly programs and teams that you can be a part of. And then we have our $15 programs, our one-off programs based off of your specific need. So we do have anything from free stuff to, you know, pay a little bit or a little bit more depending on how much you want to work directly with us.
Thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, share,
follow, tell your friends.
I should really just stick to a single order.
Yeah, we hope that you enjoy the things we're saying, and we plan on continuing to like educate and bring something different to the table.
What we are intending on doing is having these conversations that we have daily with our patients, but we want to share them publicly. So if we can help you in any way, instead of you having to come to the office with an injury, then we would be happy to. So, like
Chloe said, you like, follow, share, subscribe, get involved in our community page on YouTube, and comment on our socials. That way we can address things that maybe you're thinking about. And thanks for joining us on vacation.
Yeah.
On location.
On location.
In beautiful Italy.
Yes.
Ciao.
Ciao.